Clay is a material that's completely enduring. Clay comes from the earth. It's been dug from the earth for millennia. The obvious use of clay is to make containers or wares that can be used, but sculptures have also been made for thousands of years, and some of the earliest sculptures that have been found are 25,000 years BCE. It's almost irresistible. If you put a lump of clay on a table in front of people, they will reach out and touch it and want to do something with it. That's not going to change. The panel that I've been copying was made around about 1415. And there's some difference in opinion about whether it was made by Donatello or someone in Donatello's circle. One of the things I find particularly interesting about it also is that it was glazed, and other early Renaissance terracottas in general don't tend to be glazed. And Donatello was credited with really introducing a different way of defining form and developing a more realistic way of creating sculptures and depicting people and scenes. Wedging the clay is something that you develop a feel for, and you get to a point where you have a balance between the consistency of the clay, how much you've been working with it in the wedging, and you can slice through it and check, see whether there's any visible air bubbles, and it's something that really depends on the clay that you start with, how long you need to do it for. Thinking about the precise size came when I came to work on the panel itself. I scaled up the size of the octagon, and then I placed the different elements proportionally within that pre-drawn octagon. So I was using that as my guide for how large things needed to be. The water that's contained within the raw clay, that's what makes it a plastic material. As the clay dries, it starts to shrink. So when you're looking at a fired piece and you want the copy to be the same size as the fired piece, you have to allow for that and make it slightly larger. The tools that we use now with clay modelling are absolutely very, very similar to the tools that were used in the Renaissance and before. And as you're using them, you learn to feel the clay through the tool itself. There's a range of tools that do different things. So you might have a tool that's kind of like got a comb edge to create a texture, or a tool that has a wire loop on it to help you remove clay from the surface. And these are all tools that will have been used for hundreds, if not thousands of years. When you're working on a relief, it's quite deceptive because your mind knows what a body form is and the distance between shoulders, for instance. But because you're working on a relief, you're reducing that and you're creating a form that you want people to understand as a human body, but you're not showing the whole human body. And there's distortion in that. You have to build it up so it reads well, and that's the kind of trick in a relief panel of this nature. I wasn't working on one point at a time. I was working over the surface at a range of points, trying to kind of remember that need to have the relationship between the different points. This process of my brain telling me how things should look, I was making everything too flat, and I needed to add a lot more material to the surface to get the range of depths that were in the original panel. Making copies has a long tradition in learning and developing skills, both in the work of painters but also of sculptors. It's a process that helps teach observation and really close looking at an object. Looking at the original in order to copy is really interesting because you start to think about how has the sculptor done that much more because you're struggling with that same question yourself. I have to put myself in the place of the person who's made it and how they would have started to build up the forms and how they chose the relationships of the different forms and the decisions they were making about the high points and the low relief and how they were going to get depth into something that's not actually very deep. Clay is a really versatile, flexible material, and it's very forgiving because if you take away too much, you can add more. If you find you've added too much, you can take it away, you can push it about, you can push it back to where it was before. You have to understand the limits of what it can do, but it is a very flexible material. Firing is the process where clay is transformed from being a malleable material into something that's in a permanent state. And the firing of the clay drives off the water that is within the mixture of the clay, and it also changes the minerals within the clay body. The kiln is an electric kiln which provides radiated heat from the sides rather than in a Renaissance kiln would have had the heat being applied in the bottom of the kiln, and then the heat and fumes would be rising and making their way round the wares within the kiln. The fact that you could say, oh, actually I'm going to take that bit off and remodel it and put it back on. You could say that's a benefit of the material, but at the same time there always has to come a point when you say, okay, this is it now. And that, I don't feel that point is about what the material is. That's something else.